Hi. Today I'll be presenting the scene from Hamlet, Act 1 of Scene 3. This is between Polonius and Ophelia. This is after the brother has left. So the scene demonstrates the purpose of Polonius' protective and his controlling nature with Ophelia and the struggles Ophelia has for affections for Hamlet and her duty to obey her father. Polonius believes he's protecting his daughter, preserving her honor. He does not trust Hamlet's promise, and he sees himself as a wise father giving advice. He just gave the advice to his son, and his son has just left. And you can see how it's portrayed, the way he acts to the son and to the daughter. It actually kind of reminds me of Hispanic and Latino culture in that way, because in Hispanic and Latino culture, you can notice sometimes the father acts a different way to the son versus the daughter, and Hamlet portrays that in some way in a connection. So we all know Ophelia believes Hamlet's affections genuine. She respects her father and seeks his guidance. Although she has feelings for Hamlet, she ultimately chooses to obey her father. At the beginning of the scene, Polonius stands confidently in the center of the room, while Ophelia stands quietly off to the side. This portrays how Ophelia feels when she's near her father, the way Polonius asks what Hamlet has said to her. He speaks calmly, and Ophelia always answers with respect, but she avoids direct eye contact. Ophelia has admitted that Hamlet had expressed affection for her, while Polonius and her brother have had more distant to the fact that they know how a man is. They say that Hamlet's only using her, and that he doesn't really love her. If they had to choose, Hamlet would choose somebody else. In fact, Hamlet is royalty, and she is from a different lineage, and that it would never work out. And Polonius points this out in a very animated way. He walks closer, his gestures are emphasizing his disbelief, and he's more firm than he is with his son. He shows concern and authority. It's because of his control he wants to have over Ophelia and his overprotectiveness of it. Meanwhile, you have Ophelia, who is constantly looking uncertain. She says Hamlet loves her, he will honor his vows, and basically she has this belief, and she speaks sincerely, and she thinks that Hamlet actually loves her. While Polonius interrupts and warns her not to trust Hamlet, in fact, not to lower her guard, to always remember that Polonius is just trying to do what's for her, best for her, that Hamlet is going to use her and throw her away and discard her. It gets to the point where Ophelia lowers her head and takes a step back to show doubt and sadness, and how she closes up. When Polonius stands directly in front of Ophelia at the end of this play and firmly commands her not to speak with Hamlet again, he turns and begins to leave. Ophelia is paused, looking disappointed and conflicted, because softly she said, "I shall obey my lord," and follows him off stage. Even though the scene has a very impact, it actually shows the diagnostics of how women were viewed, and how this play takes on the new portrayals of how the difference between how a father treats a daughter versus how he treated the sons during that age. It was very serious. It was in fact, the play portrayed it in a serious tone. And Polonius shows appear concerned and authorities rather than anger. Meanwhile, you have Ophelia, who's being respectful but emotionally conflicted, because she has already given up to Hamlet. In fact, she's loved Hamlet. She believes the love they portray is going to win at the end of the day. And their expressions show the imbalance of power between a father and a daughter, and foreshadows the tragedy that unfolds later in the play. Fact, you can see, based on this first scene, Here is Lord Polonius. What is it, Ophelia, be hath said to you? Ophelia responds with, so please use something touching the Lord Hamlet. Well, meanwhile, you have Lord Polonius, who very well be thou. 'Tis told me he hath very old of late given private times to you, and you yourself have of your audience been most free and bounteous, if it be so, as so 'tis put on me, and that in a way of caution I must tell you, you do not understand yourself so clearly, as it beholds my daughter and your honor. What is between you, give me the truth. And like I said, he points it out, like, what have you been doing? What are you up to? He's basically like being a modern, overprotective, very controlling dad. And Ophelia responds with that, he hadn't, my lord, of late made many tenders of his affection to me. Meanwhile, the lord is like, affection? Pooh, you speak like a green girl, unshift in such perilous circumstances. Do you believe his tenders, as you call them? Basically calling it out as it is. Meanwhile, you have Ophelia, who says, I do not know, my lord, what I should think. No, she doesn't know what's going on. Where meanwhile we get to where it finally points out by the Lord, Meredith, I teach you. Think yourself a baby, that you have tended these tenders for true pay, which is not sterling. Tender yourself more daily, or not to crack the winds of the poor phrase. Running is thus, you tender me a fool. Basically, he points out he points it out, like, I want to tell you something. He's you gotta keep it protected. In fact, he's like straight up pointing out her virtues as a woman. She has to protect them. And even in modern times here, we get that a lot. And Ophelia is then proclaiming that Hamlet loves her. And by the end of it, we could see the dynamic of womanhood. And I personally, it gets to the point where the Lord speaks it in a very long paragraph. I springe to catch woodcocks. I do know when the blood burns how prodigy the soul lends the tongue vows these blazes, daughters giving light, then heat extinct, and both even in their promise as of making. You must not take for fire. And it goes on, and he says, Lord Hamlet will never love you. He will never make that vow. And Ophelia, you need to understand to protect your honor as a woman, as a family member of this. Because if Ophelia was to get with Hamlet, which she has already done, but they don't know that, then she not only does she dishonor her family, but now she's unvirtuous. And in that modern time, women who did not keep their virginity to the point after marriage was considered dirty and a disappointment and a dishonor to their family. Thank you so much for this interpretation, and my name is Isabella Tech,